Welcome to Silent Screams, where darkness, whispers, and terror await you. Are you ready to confront your fears? Story 1: The Curse of Emilia. The crowded auction house buzzed with murmurs of eager bidders. Hidden among antique furniture and vintage paintings was a glass case containing a porcelain doll. It had striking green eyes, intricately braided blonde hair, and a delicate white lace dress, faded with age. The doll was unsettling, yet captivating. "This is Emilia," the auctioneer announced. "A rare 19th century doll, rumored to be cursed. The previous owner claimed it moves on its own." Laughter rippled through the room. But for Emma Carter, a struggling antique shop owner, Emilia was an opportunity. Ignoring the warnings, she won the bid for a shockingly low price. Back at her shop, timeless treasures, Emma placed the doll in the storefront window. Customers were drawn to it. But something about Emilia felt off. That night, Emma locked up and headed home, unaware that she had invited something sinister into her life. Emma awoke to a crash. Her heart raced as she crept down to her shop. The window display was shattered, and Emilia lay on the floor, her glass case broken. Nothing else seemed disturbed. "It's just the wind," Emma muttered, though unease lingered. The next day, she noticed strange occurrences. Items moved without explanation. Whispers echoed in empty rooms, and the shop's atmosphere felt oppressively heavy. Customers began avoiding the store, claiming they felt watched. One night, while cataloging items, Emma heard faint laughter. She spun around. Emilia sat on the shelf, her green eyes fixed on Emma. "You're losing it," Emma whispered. But deep down, she wasn't so sure. Determined to uncover the truth, Emma researched Emilia's origins. She learned that the doll once belonged to a wealthy family in the late 1800s. The daughter, Lily, adored Emilia but tragically drowned in the family pond. After Lily's death, the family claimed the doll became alive, tormenting them with unexplainable phenomena. Emma found a diary entry from Lily's mother. "Emilia whispers at night. She knows things no one should know. I've seen her move. She's not just a doll, she's something else." Despite the growing evidence, Emma couldn't part with Emilia. Selling her might endanger someone else, or worse, the doll might come back. The disturbances escalated. Lights flickered, doors slammed, and Emilia's laughter grew louder. One night, Emma woke to find the doll sitting on her bedside table, though she swore she left it downstairs. "Why are you doing this?" Emma demanded. The doll's head tilted slightly, and a childlike voice whispered, "You took me from my home." Terrified, Emma sought help from a local psychic, Mrs. Delaney. As soon as Mrs. Delaney entered the shop, she froze. "This doll, it's a vessel," Mrs. Delaney said. "A spirit is bound to it. But it's not a child. It's something older, darker." Mrs. Delaney attempted a cleansing ritual. But the moment she began, Emilia's eyes glowed an unnatural green. A guttural scream filled the shop, and Mrs. Delaney collapsed, clutching her chest. "Leave it alone," she gasped before fleeing. Desperate, Emma decided to return Emilia to the family estate where Lily had died, hoping to break the curse. The abandoned manor was eerie, its windows shattered and ivy consuming the walls. Emma carried Emilia to the pond where Lily drowned. The moonlight cast an otherworldly glow as Emma whispered, This is where you belong. Suddenly, the air grew cold. Shadows coalesced into a humanoid figure, Lily. Her face was sorrowful but twisted with malice. Why did you take her? Lily hissed, her voice overlapping with Emilia's. I didn't know. Emma pleaded. I'm sorry. The ghost lunged at Emma, who tripped and fell into the pond. As water filled her lungs, she glimpsed Emilia's porcelain face beneath the surface, smiling. Days later, a new auction featured an authentic 19th-century porcelain doll with vibrant green eyes. The auctioneer warned of its haunted reputation, but laughter once again filled the room. The winning bidder smiled as they admired Emilia. Unbeknownst to them, the curse was beginning anew. Story 2, The Curse of Isabella. The musty air of the old auction house wrapped around Claire as she meandered through the crowded aisles. Her grandmother, a collector of antique dolls, had passed recently, leaving Claire with an unexpected obsession to continue her legacy. Among the myriad of forgotten treasures, Claire's eyes landed on a peculiar porcelain doll sitting atop a dusty mahogany shelf. The doll, no taller than a child's forearm, wore a faded lavender dress trimmed with intricate lace. Her glass eyes, unsettlingly lifelike, glinted under the dim chandelier lights, and her black curls framed a face painted with eerie precision. Beneath the stand on which she rested was a brass plaque engraved with the name, Isabella. The auctioneer mentioned the doll was found in the attic of an abandoned estate. Its previous owners mysteriously vanished. The room buzzed with an unspoken tension when the bidding began. To Claire's surprise, no one else raised their paddle. The gavel fell. Isabella was hers. As she cradled the doll on her way out, Claire thought she heard a faint, childlike giggle. She chalked it up to exhaustion and the creaking floorboards. Claire placed Isabella on a high shelf in her bedroom, among her grandmother's prized collection of dolls. That night, as she lay in bed, a peculiar sensation crept over her, a feeling of being watched. The ticking of the antique clock on her nightstand seemed louder, the shadows on the walls darker. Claire awoke abruptly at 3:03 a.m. to the sound of soft, shuffling footsteps. She held her breath, her eyes darting to the shelf. Isabella was no longer there. Her stomach dropped as she scanned the room. There, on the floor, sat the doll, her head tilted unnaturally to the side, glass eyes reflecting the faint moonlight. Gathering her courage, Claire placed Isabella back on the shelf. The next morning, she dismissed the incident as her imagination. But when she found tiny, muddy footprints leading from her bedroom to the hallway, she wasn't so sure. Troubled by the strange occurrences, Claire visited an antique dealer known for his expertise in cursed objects. His shop was a cluttered labyrinth of relics, and his face paled when she showed him Isabella. This doll, it's not just haunted. It's bound to something dark, he whispered, his voice trembling. The name Isabella belonged to a child who lived in the late 1800s. She was accused of witchcraft and burned alive. Her mother, desperate for vengeance, trapped her spirit in the doll. The dealer advised Claire to destroy Isabella. The longer she stays, the stronger her hold will become, he warned. Claire left the shop feeling uneasy. Yet, she couldn't bring herself to destroy the doll. It was just a doll, wasn't it? The nights grew increasingly sinister. Claire awoke to Isabella sitting closer to her bed each morning. Doors slammed shut on their own. Mirrors cracked without reason, and whispers echoed through the house. One evening, Claire returned from work to find the walls of her living room scrawled with crude, childlike drawings of stick figures. At the center was a grotesque image of a girl surrounded by flames. Claire's friend Sarah, a skeptic, offered to stay the night. "It's all in your head," she assured Claire, laughing off the stories. But as the clock struck 3:03 a.m., Sarah's laughter turned to screams. She pointed to the corner of the room, where Isabella stood upright on her own, her glass eyes fixed on Sarah. Before Claire could react, the doll lunged forward, shattering the lamp and plunging the room into darkness. The two women fled the house, desperate for answers. Claire returned to the antique dealer, who provided a grim solution, a cleansing ritual involving fire. "But be warned," he said. "Isabella will resist." Claire prepared the ritual in the dead of night, setting up a fire pit in her backyard. As she placed Isabella on the flames, the doll screamed, a high-pitched, ear-splitting wail that seemed to reverberate through her very soul. The fire flickered, and for a moment, the flames took the shape of a little girl's face. Her eyes filled with rage. Objects in the house began to fly through the air as if propelled by an unseen force. Claire held firm, chanting the incantation the dealer had provided. As the doll's porcelain cracked and blackened, a final, guttural scream erupted, and the chaos ceased. The house returned to an eerie calm. Claire moved out shortly after, unable to shake the memories of her harrowing experience. But even as she settled into a new apartment, she couldn't escape Isabella entirely. One night, as she unpacked a box of books, she found something that made her blood run cold, a small lavender shoe, burned at the edges, nestled at the bottom of the box. And then, she heard it, a faint, childlike giggle. Story 3, The Whispering Doll. It was a chilly autumn afternoon when Clara stumbled upon the antique shop hidden in a quiet corner of the city. The shop was dimly lit, its air thick with the scent of aged wood and dust. Clara's fingers brushed against porcelain tea sets, weathered books, and tarnished jewelry before they stopped on something peculiar. A doll. The doll sat perched on a shelf, its glassy eyes staring straight ahead. It was dressed in a tattered, lace-trimmed gown, its delicate features framed by a mane of auburn curls. There was an eerie quality about it, as though its eyes followed Clara as she moved, despite the unease prickling at the back of her neck. Clara was inexplicably drawn to it. "How much for the doll?" she asked the elderly shopkeeper. The man's face darkened. "That one? Are you sure?" "Yes," Clara replied, her voice faltering under his piercing gaze. The shopkeeper hesitated, then muttered, $20. "But I must warn you, it's not an ordinary doll." Clara smiled nervously, brushing off his cryptic warning. She paid for the doll and took it home, unaware of the nightmare she had just invited into her life. Clara placed the doll on a shelf in her bedroom, thinking it would add a vintage charm to the space. That night, however, she awoke to a faint noise, whispers. She froze, her ears straining to identify the sound. It seemed to be coming from the shelf where the doll sat. Clara flicked on her bedside lamp, her heart pounding. The room was silent. The doll stared back at her with its unblinking eyes. "It's just my imagination," she whispered to herself, though the pit in her stomach said otherwise. Over the next few days, the whispers grew louder. Clara began hearing them not just at night, but during the day as well. Sometimes, she thought she heard her name being called in a faint, sing-song voice. She tried to ignore it. But the unease was impossible to shake. Then came the scratches. One morning, Clara woke up to find faint scratches on her bedroom door. As though something, or someone, had been clawing at it. The doll's position seemed to change subtly. 2. Though Clara dismissed it as her imagination playing tricks. But when she found the doll sitting at the foot of her bed one morning, its blank eyes staring up at her, she knew something was very wrong. Desperate for answers, Clara returned to the antique shop, clutching the doll in her trembling hands. The shopkeeper's expression darkened the moment he saw her. "I warned you," he said grimly. "What is this thing?" Clara demanded. The shopkeeper sighed and motioned for her to sit. That doll belonged to a girl named Lila. Born over a century ago. She was said to possess strange abilities. A connection to the other side. The doll was her most cherished possession. But when Lila died under mysterious circumstances, her spirit became bound to it. Strange occurrences followed anyone who owned it, whispers in the night. Objects moving on their own. Even deaths. Why would you sell it? Clara's voice was tinged with anger and fear. It's not that simple. The doll chooses its owner. Returning it won't change anything now, it's bound to you. Clara felt her stomach drop. She pleaded for help. But the shopkeeper simply handed her an old book of rituals and told her to leave. Clara spent the next few nights poring over the book, trying to find a way to rid herself of the cursed doll. The whispers became louder, more menacing. The scratches on her walls multiplied, forming patterns that looked like crude symbols. One night, as she was studying the book, the lights in her apartment flickered and went out. Clara froze. The only sound in the darkness her ragged breathing. Then, she heard it, a child's laughter. High-pitched and chilling. The doll was no longer on the shelf. Clara grabbed a flashlight and followed the sound of the laughter to her living room. There, in the center of the room, sat the doll. Its head tilted to the side. A cruel smile now etched onto its face. Fueled by terror and desperation, Clara began the ritual she had memorized. She drew a circle of salt around the doll, chanting the incantation from the book. The laughter turned to shrieks, the room shaking violently as the spirit within the doll fought back. Finally, with a blinding flash of light, the room fell silent. The doll lay motionless, its glassy eyes dull and lifeless. Clara buried the doll in the woods, far from her home, and tried to move on with her life. 4 weeks. Her apartment was peaceful. The whispers stopped, and the scratches on the walls faded. But one morning, Clara found a familiar object sitting on her kitchen table. The doll. Its smile wider than ever. And this time, the whispers began in broad daylight.